What's simpler than talking about calendars? She thinks, as the realization of the complexity dawns on her, as it always does when she tries to do an easy topic. Okay, well, maybe I'll just do the Attic calendar? Which one then? And what about the monthly birthdays of the gods between Numenia and Deipnon? Does that need its own video? Does it? How did the Attic calendar work? And what does that have to do with modern Hellenist worship? Let's take a look. Kairete. Before we get started, I want to give a big thank you and shout out to Jade the Sad American for the gift of De Natura Deorum from Leb. I've read Cicero many times throughout my life, and every time I return I find new things and differences in translation that unlock new meanings. I'd like to do a video on this particular work sometime in the future. For now, we have the at once massive and also relatively small topic of the Hellenic worship calendars. And yes, that's calendars plural, though we're about to go over why I'll only be talking about one of them in this video. As I have stressed in so many previous videos, ancient Greece wasn't a nation-state in the way that we think about countries today. It was a collection of smaller city-states, each with their own independent forms of governance and laws, and often calendars. Information on dang near any civic or festival calendar outside of Attica is scant to say the least. Just ask anyone who's ever attempted to reconstruct the worship calendars of Boeotia or Syracusa. Recent evidence has made the sacrificial calendars of Corinthos a little more accessible, however, it's quite the wade through scholarly work to get to anything particularly useful. By far, the most surviving evidence we have to this day comes from Attica, where the meticulous sacrificial and civic calendars were kept by magistrates and preserved by priests and members of the civic government. Being as both rich and warlike as Attica was, it's not surprising that so much evidence comes down to us from that particular city-state. Regardless, according to the evidence we have, all Greek city-states used a lunar calendar, which was recreated every year to ensure that it lined up with the lunar cycles and lined up with the actual seasons, as lunar calendars can suffer from seasonal drift if not manually adjusted, and didn't get in the way of any wars that might or might not have been going on. This last point was particularly important during the Peloponnesian War, in which several city-states adjusted the dates of many festivals to fall outside of the best times for troops to move during said conflict. These calendars consisted of 12 lunar months, alternating 29 and 30 days, with the 29-day months referred to as hollow months. We'll get into hollow months in a minute when we talk about the monthly Numenia worship calendar and sacred days, but for now it's important to know that this results in a 354-day year, which creates the issue of not quite keeping up with the 365-day solar year. The solution in antiquity was to repeat one of the previous 12 months every other year in order to keep the calendars in sync, and which was repeated was determined by those creating and syncing the calendar. Given how the dates could, under duress, be moved from year to year but usually weren't, I'll be focusing on the typical 12 months and the new moon to new moon calendar for this video. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on what each of the festivals that I'll name are, as that would take an incredibly long time, and I also have videos out already on a few and plans for more in the future. So for now, let's take a look at the monthly new moon calendar itself. Each Greek lunar month consisted of 3 groups of 10 days, called decamerons, the last being 9 days on so-called hollow or 29-day months. The first Decameron, called Histomenos, consisted of the period in which the new moon was waxing, and began on Numenia, or the new moon in antiquity. Keep in mind, new moon back then actually meant something different than it does in modern day astronomy. The first sliver of the moon's light marked the new moon for the Athenians, whereas the modern definition of new moon, when the moon is totally dark, would actually be Hekates Deipnon. Days begin at dawn and ended at dawn the following day, so the evening of Numenia was still Numenia until the following day. In other words, Greek days do not respect what we consider to be midnight, in which the days switch here. The folks over at the Greek organization Labrys were kind enough to compile as many ancient references to the sacred days to the gods as they could in their wonderful and well-cited work Hellenic Polytheism Household Worship, which I highly recommend for anyone who is looking to start practice, as it's concise and very much sets the potential worshipper up with rituals and a working calendar to begin with. I'll be borrowing from their work here to begin with, as I haven't seen anything more thorough anywhere else, and there are a few papers or monographs on this topic directly that I've been able to locate. The first day of Histomenos Histimenos was known as Numenia, and was dedicated to the gods of the household. On this day, a small jar known as a kathiskos would be refilled with fresh water and wine, olive oil, and pantry goods in honor of Zeus Ktesios, or Zeus of the household, after being emptied on Deipnon, or the night before. Artemis Numenia, Apollon Numenios, Zeus Ktesios, Hermes, Hera, Hecate, and Hestia were all honored, especially on this day, as protectors of the household, though many modern Hellenists also choose to do a larger prayer to all the gods that they honor in their households and present offerings alongside those for the guardian of the household boundaries. The second Histimenos was dedicated to the Agathodaimon, or the good spirit which guards and guides each individual household. Some modern Hellenists also honor other spirits and heroes on this day as well. Third Histimenos was dedicated to Athena and the Kerites, or the goddesses that ruled over joy, celebration, parties, and festivals. Some people pronounce that word charities. It's spelled similarly. Fourth Histimenos was dedicated to Heracles, Hermes, and Aphrodite. Fifth Histimenos was considered an unlucky day, though it isn't really clear from works and days if that ill-omened day meant not to make major decisions or if no one honored the gods at all on those days. Some modern worshippers opt not to make offerings on the 5th or the 25th days at all. Some choose not to make major decisions, but still make offerings to patron gods on these days. It really is somewhat of a personal preference. 6th Histimenos was dedicated to Artemis, and 7th to Apollon, and 8th to Poseidon and Theseus. The 9th was dedicated to Helios, the Mosai, and Rhea. If the 10th day was dedicated to anyone, we've lost the records of such, and Hesiod makes no reference in works and days. The second Decameron, Mesontos, doesn't have a heck of a lot of information left about it. The first day, or the 11th of the lunar month, was said to be particularly favorable to agriculture by Hesiod, but we don't get much info until the 5th or 15th of the month, which was the full moon and also sacred to Athena. Many modern practitioners choose to honor Selene and Artemis on the full moon due to their lunar associations, but I haven't seen a ton of evidence for this idea historically. That said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the practice, and I myself actually do so as well every month. The next day was said to be sacred to Artemis. The 8th and 9th, or the 18th and 19th, were said to be good for cleansing rites to begin prepping for the next month. The third Decameron, Phithinontos, actually counts backwards. The 9th day, or the 21st of the month, is dedicated to Athena, as is the 8th, or 22nd. The 5th through 1st of this Decameron was considered inauspicious days for worship, apart from the 3rd, which may have also been sacred to Athena. We then get Triakas, or Deipnon, the Hecatean dinners, in which the household would take a full plate of food and leave it at the crossroads for Hecate and the restless spirits that she leads. Many modern Hellenists will also dress a spot at the table on this day for the ancestors and converse with them prior to taking it to the crossroads, as a way to stay connected to the dead each month. In the full or 30-day month, the next day was known as the Enekaina, and on this day the Kathiskos jar would be emptied outside and cleaned in preparation for the filling on Numenia. On holomonths this would still happen, but it would happen on the 29th alongside the Hecatean dinners. As a modern Hellenist, we have a lot of flexibility in how we practice. Not everyone worships perfectly with the calendars, and keeping track of the lunar month can be a challenge when you first get started doing it. It's really good to have a written record or calendar where you can note where these days are to keep track of them, especially if you also plan on celebrating any of the major civic festivals that we're about to touch on. Just because a day is sacred to a particular god doesn't mean you can't honor any other gods on that day, or that it's somehow wrong to. Keep in mind that many households had patron deities that they honored regularly or daily, and craftspeople and skilled laborers would often honor the patrons of their craft before they started their work. These things are not set in stone, even if they were once put on paper. Also, in terms of syncing the calendar up, some Hellenists choose to sync the calendar up with the way that those dates would shift in Greece, versus others who choose to sync their calendar up with their own local time zones. Again, I see this as a personal choice, and not necessarily something that there is a right or wrong way to do. I personally tend to sync things up with my own local time zone in order to keep in tune with the cycles in my own local area. It is, however, entirely a personal choice, and several major organizations that put out calendars every year tend to sync them up with Greece. So again, just keep that in mind if you decide to follow any of the published calendars that are out there. With that out of the way, this actually brings us to the yearly calendar. Because keep in mind, these monthly days overlapped and intersected with the yearly civic festivals. In fact, several of them were specifically put on the sacred days to the gods that they honored. So when I say dates for each of these months we're about to discuss, they don't invalidate the sacred days of these gods. This did not change from month to month, but the festivals did. Got it? Alright, let's take a look at the yearly Attic calendar. It was divided into either 12 or 13 months depending on the year. Hekatambion, Metageitnon, Boedromion, Pionupsion, Maimakterion, Poseidon, Gamalion, Antisterion, Elaphebolion, Munikion, Targelion, and Scirophoron. Each one of them were named after either the main festival of the month, or in the case of Hekatambion, after a major offering that happened during that time. As we go through the months, I'll discuss the main festival the month was named after briefly, but I do plan on covering each month's festivals more in depth at a later date, so I'm not going to go over all of them super in depth here. Given I've already done 2 whole videos just on individual festivals, you can probably see why that would be a lot for a calendar video. One of the first things that you'll notice looking at the date ranges for the 12 months on the screen, Hekatambion happens in July-August most years, but Panathenaia is considered the New Year festival. The Greeks organized their calendars largely by the agricultural year, and as I mentioned in my video on Panathenaia, it tended to think more in months than individual days. Thus, the New Year wasn't rung in on Hekatambion 1, but rather, the whole month constituted the New Year's celebrations and preparations for the year to come. If anything could be considered the official New Year celebration, it would actually likely be the Panathenaia. I covered that more in depth in my video on the Athenian New Year, if you're interested. The following month, Metageitnion, had a similar festival in it that went by the same name, which was derived from one of Apollon's main epithets, Metageitnios. This epithet and the festival referred to Apollon's role in emigration and immigration, and the festival was believed to commemorate the emigration of the inhabitants of Melite to Diomes. There was also another festival, Heracleia at Kinosarges, that I'll go into more at a later date, but was specifically commemorated the achievements of non-Athenian citizens who would not have access to other athletic clubs like the gymnasium in which it was held. Feasting and drinking were also a huge part of any festival dedicated to the hero, as he was said to enjoy indulging in excess of both food and drink in myth. This brings us to month 3, Boedromion, named for the Apolline festival Boedromia. This festival was held on the 7th of the month and commemorated the time when Ion came to help the Athenians during the reign of the mythical Erechtheus while they were at war with the Eleusinians. Erechtheus was said to have fallen in battle during the same event, and Ion was made king after him in gratitude for his help. Apollon's epithet, Boedromios, may have also been derived from a word that meant to come for help with a shout. Genesia, the Athenian festival of the ancestors that I covered in my video on ancestor worship, also took place on this month, as did the Eleusinian Mysteries. I will cover those far more in depth later, but suffice to say that most of what we have is scholarly conjecture for attempts at reconstruction. We don't have a ton of information on them because, well, they were mysteries. They were kept well. Pianipsion, the 4th month, was named after another festival to Apollon, the Pianipsia, though it actually began with an agricultural festival to Demeter that marked the preliminary to plowing each year, the Perosia. First foods offerings were collected from the entire Athenian city-state and offered on Perosia, though this fell out of practice later in history after the Peloponnesian War. Pianipsia was celebrated on the 7th of the month and entailed feasting, offerings, and the creation of a particular stewed dish featuring beans as its main ingredient alongside grains and first fruits from the fields, the panspermia. Much ado has been made about panspermia in modern times, particularly in occult communities, but our best evidence shows that it was likely just a communal stew that featured legumes as the main ingredient with grain and vegetables, along with sometimes meat as garnishes. Later this month, another major festival, the Themasphoria, also took place, though that one needs its own video alongside Dacia, which took place just before. Surprisingly, the following month, Maimakterion, contained no major festival or festival days. H.W. Park, in his book Festivals on the Athenians, believes that this was likely due to the volatile nature of the time of year in Greece. Bad weather made travel difficult for big celebrations at the best of times, and a lot of work had to be done in the fields at the time. The month is named after a small purificatory procession that occurred on the last day of the month, the Maimakteria, where a small group of those to be purified would lead a sheep to Zeus's altar to be sacrificed, under his epithet Zeus Melikios. Upon arriving, they were to place their left foot on the sheep before it was killed, to absorb any agos that they might have accumulated prior to the ceremony. The sheep was then skinned, and the skin would be used later on in various rites surrounding appealing to Zeus for a change in the weather. We don't know a lot about the next month of Poseidon's festivals. Scholars assume there must have been a festival to Poseidon, Poseideia, but there's scant information about it if so. There was a festival toward the end of the month to Demeter and Dionysus, Haloa, which appeared to be a festival of corn and fertility. There were also a number of different neighborhood country Dionysias that would take place during this month, where aristocrats would invite traveling theater troupes to perform the most popular plays from the city Dionysia, and miniaturized versions of the processions and offerings to the gods that happened during the city of Dionysia would take place at the local level. The next month, Anthesterion, comes to us in the spring when the first flowers begin to bloom. The festival is named after Anthesteria, was a children's festival, in addition to a Dionysian rite concerned with wine and the afterlife. Children who made it to 3 years old would be given flower crowns on the first day of the 3-day festival. We'll get deeper into Anthesterion in a later video, as there's a lot of ground to cover there. At the end of the month, another festival to Zeus Malikios, the Asia, took place in which the whole of Attica went outside to give whole burnt offerings to Zeus. And by that, we mean animals, primarily. This took place 10 days after Anthesteria and was a solemn occasion, though there was some feasting afterwards as family gathered with what they could afford following sacrifices. Month 9, Elaphebolion, was named after a festival of Artemis that took place on the 6th, under the epithet Artemis Elaphebolios, or shooter of deer. However, eventually, this once key festival fell in prominence to the much larger city Dionysia, which I covered in its own whole video because it's quite the beast. Dionysia was a festival of writing, wine, and wangs, celebrating at once fertility and festivity, as well as defining the literary culture of Athens for the whole of the classical era. Another smaller occasion, the Pandia, occurred at the end of the month and is believed to be connected with the hero Pandion, though there's not a lot of evidence left as to how or why. It wasn't near as large an occasion as either Elaphebolia or the Dionysia. Month 10, or Munichion, was also named for a festival of Artemis, though again, not as large as some of the others we've discussed. Munichia was characterized by an offering of a female goat in honor of an old legend in where a she-bear went to Artemis's shrine and was killed by the Athenians, angering Artemis as death happened on her sacred ground. She was said to demand the offering of a woman from Athens, and a man named Ambaros offered to solve the issue by giving up his daughter. He brought her to the shrine, but then dressed as she-goat in women's finery and gave the goat instead. A lot of scholars say that stories like this point to a time when human sacrifice might have been common in archaic Greece, but I do plan on covering why that's most likely not the case in a future video. On the 19th, the military festival Olympia took place, which was characterized by great feats of military showmanship by Athenian cavalry and lavish sacrifices to Zeus Olympios. Month 11, Thargelion, was named after the festival Thargelia, another Apolline festival that honored Artemis as well and lasted 2 days, the 6th and 7th. The 6th was a day of purification, the 7th a day of feasting and offering. A massive pot of grains and first fruits of the harvest would usually be offered and feasted on to celebrate the beginning of crop development, usually in May. 2 smaller religious events in preparation for the future Panathenaia also occurred during this month, Plenteria and Kalenteria, though toward the end of the month, I covered both in detail on my video on the Athenian New Year. Highly suggest checking that out if you'd like to know more about both of those religious events. Well, we've made it to the final month of the Aetherian year, Scirophorion, which also had a lot of controversy around it in scholarly circles. Scirophoria, or the Scira, was a women's festival, and as such, we don't have a lot written on it to draw from. It involved a procession with the priests of Athena and Poseidon carrying a sunshade, and other rites that apparently made it the best time of the year for house building. If you'd like me to do a deep dive into it later, let me know in the comments. I've found a lot of papers of scholars arguing with each other over the scant evidence that we have. There are many other festivals that I either didn't have the time to note, didn't have enough evidence in my sourcing to discuss in any depth, or didn't have the approximate dates at the time for the sources that I've drawn on were writing about them. But I do hope that this has given you a better idea of how busy the ancient festival calendar was. Remember that we don't live in a culture that reinforces events outside of ourselves. So trying to keep up with such a busy calendar can become maddening pretty fast. If you're getting started, I highly suggest focusing on the regular Numenea cycle as you get comfortable with it, and adding days that are sacred to the gods you feel are closest to in terms of festivals. Then eventually adding some of the larger festivals like Panathenaia and Dionysia if you feel drawn to it. Take things at your own pace, and remember, the ancients were responding to the gods and honoring the events that were important to their local mythic histories, not just events sacred to the gods themselves. It's okay if you don't hit every single sacred day and festival. Remember that a lot of the ancients probably didn't have enough money to travel to go see them anyway themselves, so we're lucky that we get to practice this way ourselves in the modern day. Thank you so much for sticking through that. If you're new here, put your left foot on the subscribe button and skin the like. Drop down into the comments and let me know which of the festivals I haven't covered yet that you'd like to know more about. Or just yell at me for not mentioning a date that's important to you if that's your speed. This script is already 7 pages long as it is. I did my best, guys, I promise. Special thanks also to my patrons who requested this video when I put up the ever-growing list of all the videos I've promised to make but haven't yet. You all gave me the gift of Marmaras, my adorable new baby gargoyle gecko, who is still utterly terrified of everything, but is also a source of joy and happiness for me in times that have been rough for several months. Without you, I also wouldn't have the means to do the level of research that I do now, to track down some of the rarer sources and use them for longer works like this that might only draw a small portion of my audience due to their technical nature. May the cycle of reciprocity between us ever remain positive. And remember, we're stronger together.